Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host, and I'm joined by the film encyclopedia man, Boaz Dix. We are a couple of filmmakers on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode we pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on VOD. Myself and Boaz pick our favourite film from that topic, or team up against a guest and battle it out to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 1. Hello, podsters. This week we are starting our Legends episode for the first time this year, and we're starting with Robin Williams films, and it's very exciting to announce we have our first guest of the year as well, Claire from Why the Flick podcast. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. And Boaz was supposed to be here, but I guess he's still busy trying to change his name to Nwanda. So he might pop in later. We don't know yet. So Claire, tell us about your podcast and where can we find you?
Yeah, so we are called Why the Flick. We are a movie review podcast. Yeah, I think we started at the end of 2021. Wow, I can't believe it's been that long. We just have a blast like talking about different movies every week. We just ended our last season 3 in October, and we're gearing up to come back for we ended season 2, last year, and we're gearing up to come back for season 3 this year. So I'm very excited, and yeah, just love talking movies.
Awesome. So you picked Robin Williams films for our first Legends episode. So why did you pick Robin Williams other than the other actors that I can't remember what I put down now? I think it's like Sean Connery and Al Pacino, maybe.
Also great.
So why Robin Williams for you?
Yeah, so with Robin Williams, he was just such a staple in my childhood. I was very much a child of the 90s and grew up all through that decade as a kid. And so he was very much in a lot of kid movies that I would watch during that time. And I think he just has such a great presence on screen. He has also an incredible range because he can make you laugh, cry, feel a huge array of emotions, I think. He's one of my favorite, if not my favorite actor. And so, that's really what drew me to want to pick him.
Cool. Yeah, I think for me, we might be similar age. I certainly grew up on a lot of Robin Williams films, like a lot of his comedies. I just think there's no one like Robin Williams. Like his fast talking jokes and wit just comes through so naturally for him compared to anyone else on the planet at that time. And he was so good in his drama films as well, playing it straight and yet still bringing in a lot of childhood antics, if you will, into his performances in those films as well. I love the guy, and it's such a shame he's not with us anymore, but I think certainly his filmography is fantastic.
Yeah, I think he has such an ability to improvise, and to a point where I don't think I've ever seen another actor be able to reach that level of improvisation that he's been able to do or was able to do.
Right, shall we go with your pick first then, Claire?
Sure, I would love to.
What film did you go for Robin Williams then?
So after much thought, I decided to go with Jumanji. This one I felt impacted me the most as a kid, and I was super obsessed with this movie. And so that's why I decided to pick it.
Were there any other films in contention, or was it just Jumanji for you?
It was probably most likely going to be Jumanji, but obviously I also love him in Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yes.
The Birdcage is another one I had thought of too. there's just so many to pick from, but definitely Jumanji. Like, I just was obsessed with this movie. I had the actual board game that you could play. Yeah, that came out after the movie.
I feel like that would freak me out if I had seen the film and then had the board game. Yeah. Like, no, get that away from me now.
Right. No, I was probably like honestly mad that it wasn't real because I just wanted it to be real.
Really?
But yeah, that was fun. And right, okay. And I don't know.
Do the pieces have magnets on them, or
no? And I mean, okay. I think I wanted the board game to look like the actual board game in the movie, but it was very much just like a cardboard folding thing, and like I think they might have had animal tokens. I can't remember, but yeah, I just loved playing the game, and nothing came out of that game, at least. So.
Phew.
Yeah.
So what happens in Jumanji?
So essentially, these kids find this magical board game that when played, things come out of the board game. It's very much inspired by, I guess, like things you would find in deepest parts of Africa and all of that. And so it kind of also goes across different decades. We like start in the 1800s and then go into like the 1960s, and then we get up to present day when the movie came out, which was 1995. And so there are these different characters who all have to come together to finish the board game and deal with everything that's coming out of the board game that's trying to essentially kill them and beat the game and get to Jumanji by the end of the movie.
So initial reactions then to this one, if you can think back to when you were a child?
I was probably scared because I think everything scared me when I was a kid. And I honestly remember this being scarier than it actually is. Like, I was like, Jumanji is a scary movie, and I was told, no, it's not that scary. It's more funny. I didn't find it very funny when I was little. It seemed too scary for me. But yeah, and looking back on it now, I must have liked something about it because, as I mentioned, I was very obsessed and had the game and watched this all the time. I thought it was like a really cool concept to bring to life, and it is, I think, based on a children's book too. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, when I watched this for the first time, I was kind of a bit obsessed with it as well. I think it definitely has, like, thinking back, there is like certainly a scary element to this film as well. Especially, there's a lot of fun in there. Certainly, like from Robin Williams' performance, is kind of sometimes when there's one particular scene where there is some scariness in there, which I'll get into. And you're like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
But watching it back now, like, some bits are a tad dated, but I wouldn't say that necessarily in like the practical effects. It's for me in the writing a little bit, but we'll get into it. Directing then, I kind of liked the little scene with like Alan and Sarah when they play Jumanji for the first time, and you get that amazing like POV shot from like the glass dome on the board. You know, like the game is saying, I see you. And there's like a nice build up when they hear something from the fireplace and the camera moves past their heads to focus on the fireplace. But when Alan like rolls the dice and gets sucked into the game by like swirling around like right in front of Sarah, it's still quite freaky to watch for me. And I think it's like a combination of like the music and the way like he stretches so thin with the effects. So that's...
Oh, yeah.
I still feel like that's quite an affecting opening effects scene, if you will, for me even now.
Definitely haunting.
Yes.
I'll say like that scene, that was one of the first scenes I wrote down as a favorite shot. I like that it's self-contained. And I think it's also a little funny that Alan is like, I'm ready to run away from home. And then the game starts, you hear the drums beating, which is like a way that the game entices kids to want to play it. And so Alan like forgets about running away and he's like, let's play this board game instead. And you see all these weird things happening where the pieces mysteriously move and they're like, maybe it's magnetized.
Which they probably actually did in the movie. They probably used magnets anyway.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if like there was maybe a string pulling them or something. Yeah. I don't know how they did it. I didn't research that. But yeah, and then you see them looking at the little dome where the words come up, and everything is a rhyme in the game. So you are trying to figure out what it is that's going to come out. And the first thing are the bats in the chimney, which after Alan gets sucked in, I'd say that was probably one of the scariest things I saw when I was a kid. Like I wouldn't watch that part when the bats can't come flooding out, and then that one bat just perches on Sarah's shoulder, which I think the animatronics in this movie that they use are pretty good.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I think they were really well done, and the CGI, you can definitely tell it's not like what we would have nowadays, but I think it still holds up for the most part.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Yeah, I think when certainly like films from the past century use practical effects, like there's just a nice charm to it, and it brings back a lot of nostalgia of like, oh yeah, this looked really cool back in the day, and it still has a charm to it compared to most of the time when you see effects shots today. It's CGI, and you can tell it's CGI, you know, which is a shame. But apart from if you see Avatar: Way of Water, you're like, how the hell did they do that?
Right.
I gotta say, I love the monkeys in this film. They are like a little freaky looking, but I love how they're so efficient in knife throwing, car driving, and they know how to fire a shotgun. Like, I don't mind that at all. It just brings like brilliant comedy to quite a scary at times kids film. But what I do find weird is that like if monkeys riot and loot, that everyone riots and loots apparently. So I found that a bit odd watching it now, but if the monkeys are rioting, we can do it, it's fine. Oh, okay.
You know what? I don't think I've ever made that connection before, but it's so true. Like, I always just assumed the people started rioting because like weird crap was happening in the town, and everyone's like, it's the apocalypse. Like, let's just like do what we can. And that town is also like going downhill too, especially like when you see the time lapse between Alan getting sucked into the game and then like goes up 26 years later. You can see how much the town has like disintegrated because of those events.
Yeah, I didn't see that so much watching it. Like, I guess with Alan's parents not being around, the town has kind of gone into a bit of disarray, I guess.
Yeah, I guess because his father owned the shoe factory.
The monkeys take advantage, I guess. So.
Yeah, they did. Well, they saw that Wizard of Oz clip in the TV store, and they were like, we can do that.
Yeah. It brings them confidence. It brings monkeys some confidence to loot and riot.
I just love how the monkeys make little appearances throughout the entirety of the movie. They just keep popping up randomly, like you mentioned. Like, we see them on the motorcycle traffic cop bike at one point, and it's just like great. And then like they keep on driving. So yeah, I thought that was a really nice touch.
I like the action scene like in the store when Sarah, Peter, and Judy are being chased by Van Pelt. You know, they have some fun with it, where like Van Pelt shoots the heads off of these three mannequins, and Peter creates like a contraption with a canoe and air tanks, and somehow sets it off with a barbell.
Very clever.
You know, I like the creativity in that. It felt very Home Alone-y to me. A great sequence for a kid's film, but when you watch it now, you're like, how did you do that?
I know. So smart.
But I think it doesn't really matter, to be honest. It's cool to watch.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love just about everything about this movie as far as scenes go, but I think that the sequence that takes place in the Sir Save-A-Lot is probably my favorite, like, course of events. You've got, like we mentioned, Judy and Peter and Sarah are trying to run away from Van Pelt the entire time and play keep away with the board game. You have Peter putting together that trap. Then Van Pelt gets caught in the trap and just like basically gets thrown in a boat toward like a wall. And the shot where he screams, I think is funny as well. But then you also have Alan and Carl in the police car, like driving to the scene, trying to help out. And then the brakes go out in the cop car and they just come crashing through the wall and it knocks all of this paint over onto Van Pelt. I just think it's just like a great way to build up suspense and then have this like comedic ending.
You got a favorite shot or scene then, Claire?
It is probably this scene in Sir Save-A-Lot. I would say that's probably my favorite, yeah.
I think my favorite, I guess I call them dice roll events, was probably like the monsoon with the crocodile, mainly because it lasts a lot longer than any of the others.
Yeah.
You know, the rain is filling up the house. That was great. The whole atmosphere of the scene was so different from all the other action scenes, with all the vines covering the house, with the intense rain, plus Robin Williams wrestles a giant crocodile. Then there's a tidal wave that starts from the house. It was,
oh my gosh, yeah,
like the one scene that felt big and bold and expansive in a creative way. Plus, like, the water can hide some of the effects a little bit with the croc.
Yeah, that scene was so well done, I think, because you have so many elements happening at once. You've got the water, you've got the crocodiles, and you've got Robin Williams / Alan trying to wrestle a crocodile, and then you've got the other three up on the chandelier, like dealing with another crocodile. Like, there's just so much going on. I think it's so well done. And then you have Carl and Aunt Nora on the outside of the house trying to get in, and Carl tries to break down the door, and you just see like the door crack open, and all of the water comes rushing out and hits them. I think it's a really well done scene. Well, I think one of my favorite scenes with the dice and things that come out of the board game would be the stampede. That's probably one of my favorite parts. Because essentially in that moment, Alan and Sarah are having a tiff, and Peter and Judy are like, we're going to go ahead and play. And so they do it. And then you just hear this like low rumble the entire time. And you see the books on the bookshelf fall off, and
it stops
Alan,
their argument.
Yeah. And then you just see them come bursting through that library. And I think that is another one that is really well done.
Yeah. I do quite like the element of, like, because in the reboot films, they're in Jumanji, they're not in the real world, but like, it's more of a conventional film in terms of like where the threats are in this, in the reboot films. But with this, you're like, you don't know where it's going to come from. Yeah. Which is just a great device, you know. They don't just drop from the sky and just a stampede just lands on the house or whatever. Joe Johnston can create some great suspense because they don't have like the special effects to just drop things in there. And it would be kind of boring anyway, I think, if they did that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's pretty cool, I would say. So you're always on edge of like, where exactly and what is going to happen, you know? Whereas in the reboots, they're literally in a video game. So
I know they just, they appear. I think one really good example of that too is the lion scene where, you know, the lion comes out from the shadows. First of all, you like see the tail flicker across the piano keys, and then the paws come down on the piano keys, and then they're looking in the darkness, and then they see this like huge lion's head come out of the shadows. I think it's a really good way, like you said, of placing them in the movie without having to actually show how they got there.
So directing score for me, I would probably go maybe high sevens, like a 7.8. I think, you know, Joe Johnston does a great job with the effects work, and as we said, he's pretty creative with what he's got and what they achieve in this. So yeah, I'll probably go like a 7.7, I would say.
Okay.
How about you?
So I went and gave it a 9 out of 10. I went pretty high.
Okay, that's high. You can use decimals if you want.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I gave it a full 9 out of 10. I feel like most of the scenes were really well done as far as like suspense and what they had to do to work to get everything to come out of the game. And I think the plot moved along fairly well too. I liked... You know, I didn't ever feel like I was bored at any point. And I think they did a good mix of like them dealing with things coming out of the game and also other stuff that was happening throughout the entirety of the movie. So yeah, that's my score.
Yeah, I think just in terms of like child casting as well. I think they do a great job. Of course, it's a very, very young Kirsten Dunst in this film. There is one child actor I don't like, but I'll save that for acting. Right. Screenplay then. I think the film goes on with a fairly gentle tone, and I think you would expect that. You know, it's a kid's film. The creatures that come out of Jumanji are fairly familiar animals that we know, so they're not that scary, apart from the monkeys, which are weird looking.
Yeah.
Then there's like a brilliant scene where the tone of the film changes slightly when Peter uses reverse psychology on Alan that completely backfires on Peter, and Alan tells him, listen, you think monkeys, bugs and lions are scary? And Williams finishes by saying, afraid? You don't know what afraid is. You won't last 5 minutes without me. That whole speech just fills your brain with like scarier creatures in your head and ramps up the anticipation factor of what's going to come out of the game. But I'm not sure the rest of the film lives up to what Robin Williams has just said. So, I mean, do you agree with that? Or
yeah, I feel like that scene in particular, that's one that I wrote down where I feel like that was one of his best performances throughout the movie. Just that whole speech and saying like there are things that hunt you in the night and you hear something scream and you hear them eat and you hope to God that you're not dessert. Like, I just think that he delivered that really well. I mean, I think in the beginning you get a little bit of an ominous feel, especially when that like very, very first scene in the 1800s when those two kids are burying the board game for the first time. And I don't know if they're brothers, but one asks, what happens if it gets dug up? And the one kid goes, may God have mercy on his soul. And then it's just like, well, lightning hits. And I think that is another part where it fit that tone. I think another too is when Alan first goes to Sarah's house and finds out that it's Madame Serene is Sarah, and he peeks his head through the door and he's like, 26 years ago you played a game with a little boy down the street, a game with drums, and it gets a little like haunting at that point too. But those are like the only ones where I feel like it's like that. Otherwise, I wrote down a lot of comedic lines that were said throughout the movie.
I think there's like an argument to be said that the film is a bit episodic, that you're waiting for the next dice roll at the time and you don't really care about what's happens in between. But I think that makes the film quite unique. You're looking forward to seeing what the game is going to throw at them, and plus the film combines a lot of the things that come out of the game. The characters try and speed up the game towards the end to try and finish it, and you've got Sarah and Alan stuck in the floor with the spiders attacking them. Then the quake happens where the house splits in two. You have the lion come back and the vines attack Judy and she faints, so which was another added problem for them to deal with. So I like how the film like collides all the dice roll events in the end, so it doesn't feel so repetitive. So I kind of like how they kind of squish it all together with all the dice rolls. It could have easily become quite episodic. You're just waiting for the next dice roll. There is a little bit of that, I would say, in the middle, but I don't think it falls into that trap. For me, anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't for me either. And I feel like if it were just dice roll after dice roll, that would almost get boring because you are like, there's nothing to anticipate. And so you're the way that like they take kind of a break in the middle of it and they go through like the Sir Save-A-Lot stuff, for example. Like, I like that part because, and it has nothing really to do with stuff coming out of the game other than Van Pelt, but I think it's a nice break, and then they're back to playing the game, and it is a way, I think, to build anticipation. And then like you said, at the end, when everything comes together, I think that makes sense just from a plot standpoint, where it just builds and builds and builds, and here's everything all at once, like together at the end to make you like really on your toes.
There he is. Hello, a tad late.
Oh yeah, sorry. Took a little longer than I expected to.
We're on screenplay at the moment for Jumanji.
Nice.
So I think like the main criticism for me the film has at the end is the film has clear themes of like childhood trauma for all the characters, like Alan being stuck in Jumanji for 26 years and having no childhood, and his dad not allowing him to have a childhood anyway, and there was no like father-son relationship there. Like Alan battles himself throughout the film, trying not to turn into his father, and it's kind of interesting as well that Jonathan Hyde plays his father and Van Pelt, to suggest that the game plays on your own personal fears, which I loved.
Yeah.
But what I didn't love at all, actually, is the whole time travel thing that somehow the game has the ability to do, where they go back to like 1969 like nothing happens when Alan wins the game. It's like, fine, you don't have to go through the childhood trauma anymore. You know, they only kind of use that for comedy, and when very good comedy, but even when like Peter and Judy's parents come back to life. So I just felt like that the film just makes up the rules of time travel at the end, like childhood trauma can be erased just like that. And it felt like that wasn't handled very well. Like the film should have just stayed in the present, and all the characters could have become a new family, still keeping a happy ending without removing their trauma like it didn't happen. So it was a little frustrating. Yes, those scenes are funny, but I'm like, I don't know if it was just a product of the time. I'm not sure. But I mean, it was only like the 90s. I mean, what do you guys feel about the end of this film? They kind of retcons a little bit of what just happened.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really thought of it that deeply. Like, I've watched this, I think, quite a few times when I was younger.
Yeah.
And like the only thing I ever got from it is like how weird it would be to be a kid and yet have like 25 years of experiences on top of your childhood. That must be pretty weird. I can sort of see where you're coming from, that they get a chance to redo it rather than like learn from all that stuff. But I don't really have a problem. I think, yeah, I never really had a problem with that. Like, it's meant to be, it's kind of a good feeling end where you're like, oh, all that, bad stuff that they went through, oh, that's all been, over, and, they've learned a lesson, but his dad's still alive and he's made up with his dad and he's doing really well. Yeah, so I can sort of maybe see that it's kind of like this fairy tale ending, but I don't think I've ever really had a problem with that, but,
Yeah, I'd agree. I never saw a problem with it, but I can definitely see your point with it.
Yeah, I can definitely see your point of view. Yeah.
It just doesn't feel very real.
To me, it's almost like the game is like, okay, you beat me. I'm going to gift you this time back that you lost in a way. And I would say, like, the only thing I really appreciate about it is that he does get to reconnect with his dad and, have that moment where he's like, I just like missed you. And he said, well, I've only been gone 5 minutes. And Alan's like, it felt like a lot longer to me. And they did have that bonding moment. And it felt like their relationship was improved from that point. Whether that's like realistic or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I've ever found like slightly unrealistic, and probably, because of the time travel, because they're at the exact same point, it's like, why would his dad change his mind about like sending him to, do you know what I mean? Like a posh school and like treating him, oh, you've got to be a man. Like, why would he 180 like that quickly? Like that, again, as he said, like, I've only been good. He's just had that argument from his point of view. Like, he hasn't had 25 years to think, oh my God, this would probably be a mistake. So I always found that funny. Yeah, I guess it does sort of stretch like logic in order to make like a really picture perfect ending. Even though I get that, I still don't have too much of a problem with the end. I don't think every film has to be like super deep or brooding or like sort of bittersweet.
I guess for me it does.
So, some films don't, I think, have to end bittersweet. It could just be like, it just ends sweetly, just. So I just think it's one of those. So I've got no problem really.
I guess for me, I have more of a problem with the fact that Judy and Peter's parents come back to life.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, I just feel like they've missed a trick there with the fact that they could have had like their own family together.
Yeah.
I can like that too.
Yeah, and I mean, technically as well, because you follow the kids through a lot of it. Like because they never experienced all that, they're not really the same characters.
No.
So it is kind of a cop out, and I kind of get you. Like it's the whole trope of it was all a dream, or it was all it didn't really happen.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. I think the reason probably why I give it a pass is, I saw this like so early on, and it's one of maybe my first or earliest, films where it's like, it's a time reset, or it never really happened or whatever. Plus, it's got a little kind of ominous, thing for sequels at the end, like sequel bait. I thought it was pretty funny of it.
Yeah, I was really gutted when they didn't do a sequel in the 90s. I was like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah. Do you know they did like an animated series?
Did they?
I like vaguely remember that.
I remember the animation. It sort of looked like the Wild Thornberrys. I distinctly remember it. It was kind of strange.
I think also I just don't like new rules in a movie that just appear at the end. Always kind of bothers me anyway.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I sort of get what you...
For the game to just suddenly be able to do time travel is just a bit frustrating and annoying that there was no inkling or suggestion that could happen earlier on in the film. So
yeah, fair enough.
That annoys me.
It does make me wonder, like, how many times has this happened, and then timelines have been reversed, and nobody knows it.
Yeah, one of the things, like, I'm a an inquisitive person. It's like I think it's one of those things, like, you don't know where the hell this thing came from, and you still don't get an answer. And it's like, what kind of demon box is this? Who made this?
Yeah.
I don't want an origin movie, though.
They must be a god. I don't want an origin film. I think that would ruin it, because whatever I can imagine is probably like, I just imagine like some fucking almost omnipotent, African demon or something that's
right,
that knows time travel.
Just come up with this to fuck with people. Yeah.
So favorite lines, people, what we got? I think my one is kind of one that is quite shocking in a kids' film, where Kirsten Dunst says murdered, and the guy that opens up the house for them says, "Yep, little Alan Parrish. I say his father did it. There's 1,001 places he could have have his body in this house, especially if he chopped it up first." I'm like, what? Chopped it up first? Seriously? What is this movie?
They make allusions to like references to him getting chopped up into little pieces and hidden in the walls so many times in this movie. And I was like, how is this okay in a kid's movie? But whatever. It was the 90s.
Please don't chop me up, Daddy.
Jeez.
One good one from Robin Williams where he says, "Oh, thank you. No more banana leaves," when he sees the toilet.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. Most of Alan's lines, I think, I wrote down, like when Judy's like, "What am I supposed to do? There's a lion in my aunt's bedroom." And he goes, "What do I look like, a Ringling brother?" And so many good parts. Funny. Or there's another one where like it's later on and he's about to roll the dice and he goes, "Colonel Mustard in the library with the wrench."
Yeah. That was funny. That was really funny.
Does feel like an improvisation for me from Robin Williams.
It does. I wish it was. I wish I could find out if it was or not, but I'm gonna believe it was.
Yeah. So, you just saw 3 monkeys go by on a motorcycle, didn't you? Yeah. Good girl. Come on. That's my favorite. Actually.
Yeah, that was funny. I like the one where she was like, I'm hallucinating this, like, your father chopped you up, and all that stuff. And he's like, "Come on, Sarah, my father couldn't hug me, let alone chop me up in a little bit."
Yeah,
that was pretty funny.
It's just weird that they allude to that so many times, as you said.
They do.
They do. It is like a huge running thing. Like, Jesus.
Yeah. There's another thing where Sarah's like, I think it's after Alan gets mad that Peter didn't grab the game when the stampede came through, and Sarah's like, "Just ignore him, honey. He's a Libra." And for whatever reason, I think that hit me.
That was quite funny.
There's also the scene where Van Pelt goes into the gun store, and the guy asks if he's a postal worker because of going postal, and I never understood that when I was a kid. It wasn't until I was an adult.
Yeah. I think I literally only understood it this time I watched it, where I was like, oh my God, yeah, he means like, turning into a serial killer. Yeah.
Again, a children's movie,
Yeah.
yeah. I bet there are like hundreds of really dark jokes, hidden in this film.
but I'm sure.
Yeah, I can just see like some of the producers going up to Joe Johnson like, also, how's the children's film Jumanji going? Like, it's a children's film? I didn't realize we were making a children's film. It's like late teens, surely.
Right. But I feel like that's how a lot of 90s kids movies are, where like they hide things and adults find them later, but as a kid you don't realize.
Yeah, so my favorite line is quite a long one, but I just kind of like it. It's also not a funny one, but I just think it's really cool. It's, where the kids were saying, oh, you're just afraid to Alan. And then he was like, afraid? He's like, I've seen things you've only seen in your nightmares. Things you can't even imagine. Things you can't even see. There are things that hunt you in the night, that then something screams, then you hear them eating, and you hope to God that you're not dessert. Afraid, you don't even know what afraid is. I just really like that, because it was like super intense for a moment. Like, he's always really funny, and then it was like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we talked a bit about that before you came, and like it's got a fairly gentle tone, and a lot of the animals that come through are fairly familiar, but they're not scary until Robin Williams says that line, and you're like, oh, okay, what else is in this Jumanji game? But for me, I didn't feel like the film
paid off that fear.
Line,
Yeah, especially when he's talking about like things you can't even see, and you're like, things you can't imagine. You're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But and I mean, I do like the film, but it's like wild animals and a guy and a crocodile and just kind of like stuff. But still cool. But yeah, definitely sort of like a line that you should say like in a horror movie or something like that.
Yeah.
But still a great line. I still like it.
Because I guess the most apart from the monkeys, like the most freaky thing is like the vines.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, the vines were definitely, I think, the most freaky thing. Like when it almost ate Peter, when it came through the thing. I thought that was pretty scary. And then when it ate the Carl's car.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was funny. That was really funny. I think that's probably one of my favorite, bits of like acting, because that guy, Jesus.
Right. I was quite relieved as well in that moment. I'm like, finally, you've just gotten rid of your car. Get a new cop car, man. My car is half destroyed. The vine is doing you a favor.
I know.
Right.
It's like, is the department on a budget? Can they not afford another vehicle? Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That cop car just went through an entire like disintegration throughout the entirety of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, first it gets like the shotgun gets pulled by the monkeys. And Pelt shoots it, and then it like crashes through Sir Save-A-Lot. The door's missing. Like, it needed to go.
Yeah. And like he had to like unhook the door because he was cuffed to it.
Yeah, because he was handcuffed. Yeah. I was gonna add, I think the scariest one for me are the spiders. When the spiders come, like, I remember very like clearly hating that scene as a kid and hiding my eyes, especially when they zoom up on its face and its little pinchers are like moving and drooling, and I was like,
and also what's crazy, they're drooling, and it's because Robin Williams, the most capable one, he's like stuck to the floor, so they could just stab him in the face. There's nothing that he could do.
Yeah,
that was cool. I love that scene.
Screenplay score, Boaz, what should we go for?
6.5 maybe.
6.9.
6.7.
8.
Oh, well, I put you in the straight 8. Okay, 6.8. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Claire.
Oh no. Well, now I feel embarrassed because I did give it an 8.
Okay.
No, that's good, man. That's good.
Yeah, it's a solid 8.
No, I probably would have given it like in the 7s, but I'm with this like fucking grouch over here. So
just the end really bothers me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I hear you. But yeah, I gave it an 8 because I feel like for the most part, I think they did a really good job explaining, at least like in the beginning, maybe not so much the end, but like the rules of how to play Jumanji and how like they have to read it off of this board game, and like kind of continue, I also like all of the rhymes that the game presents to the people.
Yeah.
I feel like those were really well written too.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it just is all of the lines that Robin Williams says as Alan. I gave him higher marks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also do like right up to when they win the game of Jumanji and just how tense that is, like how it all builds. It's like there's an earthquake, like everything's fallen over, like they're in danger. He's face to face with Van Pelt, and he's gonna die. And he basically takes his father's advice of like, I've got to stand up to bullies. Drop, and I like the whole, what have you got in your hands? Drop it, and you get to like down the stair, and it's almost to going to fall down an endless sort of abyss, crevice, and it just stops, and it's just the right number.
Yep.
And he's like, any last words, Jumanji, and he fires the bullet, and it stops. It's just done so well, where you're like every time I see that bit, I'm like, on the edge of my seat. And then, Van Pelt and everything goes in the board game. And I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, they did it.
I think that part is done pretty well.
I feel like it's a foul roll, though. It should be on the board if you're being a stickler, but,
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
There was no way they were going to find that piece.
Just like a warning sign comes out of the board saying, foul roll, sorry. And then he just dies. Oh, shit. Did not see that ending coming. But they have time travel, so it's fine. Right, acting then. I mentioned this at a bit of a tease at the top of the podcast about us, but I really didn't like the acting from Adam Han Bird, who plays the young Alan. I'm not sure he even changes his expression until he opens the board up of the Jumanji game.
Yeah.
Where he says, neat,
To be honest, I think a lot of the kids from the 60s aren't great.
No.
So, the bullies aren't great. And I think young Sarah Whittle, I wasn't really buying her. So I don't think the kids are very good, apart from Kirsten Dunst and stuff.
Yeah.
So I will kind of agree with that.
Yeah. Like earlier when the bullies run towards him and about to beat him up, he just stands there. There's no movement that he's about to brace himself. When he hears the drum beat, nothing. Sees the box in the ground, nothing. He's a little better when he gives his dad some attitude when his dad wants him to go to boarding school. But apart from that, he's a bit wooden. But did you feel that, Claire, or...
Yeah, I would agree with that. I wasn't very much impressed with them as actors up until he gets sucked into the board game, which I'm like, how much of that is him and how much of that is like the CGI of him getting, obviously stretched out. But again, not very impressed. And I'm here for it because it's Robin Williams. So I'm just waiting for him to grow up and become Robin Williams so I can see him as a performer. But Kirsten Dunst, I think, makes up for a lot of the other kid actors because she is so good in this movie.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, she is really good. Yeah, she puts all the other kids to shame.
I love the entrance from Robin Williams in this film. He goes straight into action mode, trapping the lion in one of the rooms by jumping on the hanging light. Then he's elated when he realizes he's at home and runs around the home shouting to his mum and dad. And then going quickly to devastation when Judy tells him the house has been abandoned. So it's just a brilliant opening for Robin Williams to kind of show you he's still a kid inside, really, just a great range of emotions within a few minutes.
Yeah. I think Robin Williams has a great ability to pull out an inner child too. And you see that a lot in his other roles.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the movie Jack, he plays a guy who's essentially an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Hook as well, when he finally turns from Banning into Peter Pan. Yeah. Which I've always liked. But yeah. So he is very good at being, having that childish wonder and innocence.
I think who's great as well, and such a great physical comedian in this film, is Bonnie Hunt, who plays Sarah Whittle.
Yes.
When she sees Alan open up the game, she jumps out of her chair and...
Yeah, that always makes me laugh like hell.
Yeah, tries to convince Alan that none of it was real, and says brilliantly in this panicked fashion, no, it wasn't real, Alan. Your father murdered you and chopped you up into little pieces. But it's done in such a way that it's just so funny to watch. And even though she's dealing with trauma, but it's a great balance that she brings in her performance there.
Yeah, and I like as well when I think on one of the rolls of the dice, she's like, "Oh, so who wants a cup of tea?" But it's like, she's making it as a distraction, but you can feel that she's making it as a distraction. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like that she's nervous and just wants to leave. Yeah, I think she's quite funny.
Yeah, I do too. I think she does a really good job. And like this, right before she screams when she sees the board game, she's like on the phone with her therapist, and she was like, that event we talked about that didn't really happen. Well, a funny story. I'm sitting in the living room with him drinking lemonade. If you could call me back and give me your interpretation of this, I'd appreciate it. And I
thought that was great. And it's like, she's trying to be calm, but it's almost like she's having a panic attack at the same time that she's saying this.
I think that's her like coping mechanism. She just makes jokes out of everything. Because when she's at Sir Save-A-Lot and Van Pelt like comes out from behind the counter and grabs her, she's like, "Well, your plan's ruined. He's not here. I'm going to go now." And he's like, "Nope."
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
Any other acting moments that we like in the film?
Honestly, I really just love Jonathan Hyde. In this movie, not so much as the dad, but as Van Pelt. And
I think he's good as Van Pelt.
I don't know if like you all had this like realization when you were an adult that they're the same actor, because I didn't know until I was an adult, and then you're like, whoa, like
it blows your mind. I think when I was a kid, I thought this was a completely different person, because not only is he like buried under this like big bushy beard and
great tash, I must say.
Yeah, just great tash. And but like he's just completely different. Like he acts completely different, talks different. Yeah, pretty remarkable. I also really liked David Allen.
Oh, David Allen Greer.
Yeah, so like when he's being more of a straight man and like trying to like there's a logical explanation, he's not that fun. But when shit is going off the rails and he's like losing it, he does a great, he's lost his, shit. Like I love when the car gets eaten and like the thing tickles his neck and he starts freaking out. It's like, like that. And he comes out and he's like, "What the fuck?" Like almost like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "Fine, take it." I thought that was brilliant. I've always laughed at that bit.
Yeah.
And he's freaking out when he sees a crocodile, an alligator swim out beside him. Like his freak out voice is just hilarious.
His scream is hilarious.
Better than that.
Yeah.
That's the thing I like about this acting cast is like, obviously Robin Williams is in it. We know we're going to get an incredible performance from him, but at the same time, all of these other supporting cast people, actors will rise to the occasion too. Because Carl's one of my favorites, Sarah's one of my favorite, Judy's one of my favorites. So they all do, I think, a really good job as well. It's not just Robin Williams carrying it.
So Boaz, favorite performance for you? Who are you going with?
I'm going with, the R-Man, Robin Williams.
Yeah. Claire, same?
Yeah. Yes, I would have to. It's almost unfair to the rest of them. But
yeah. I think it's a full house. Yep, I'm going Robin Williams as well for my favorite performance. Yeah. Acting score, though, what should we go with? 8.3? As we've said, like, Robin Williams is so good.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, he just brings, like, this, again, like, great comedy, but again, there's this like blurring of performance of whether he's still a child or an adult, and he's very much battling that in his performance anyway.
I think it's also definitely, and I think it's also funny because when you're talking about his child self, I think he's more like childlike in his innocence than the child version of him.
Yeah,
which is kind of hilarious. So maybe they should have just had him, I don't know, shrunk down and play the kid, and then I don't know.
They didn't have that like face technology at the time to de-age yourself.
Yeah, he could have just walked on his knees.
I'm going to go with a 9.5. I feel like this is a really great cast of actors. Cool. So really it's taken away from the other child actors who are in it, but everyone else does such a good job that I think it makes up for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, let's add up the scores then for Jumanji. Jumanji gets 49.3. which ain't half bad, I don't think. That's it for part 1. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 2 to see who wins. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell us what your favourite films are relating to the episodes. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for Twitter at FVF_podcast. If you do, we'll give you a shout out on the next episode. If you're feeling really generous, you can buy us a one-off coffee at our Buy Me a Coffee account. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.